Hi, I'm MassTLC CEO Tom Hopcroft, and I'm excited to be joined here today by Frances West. She's an international business leader in the digital inclusion space. She's author of a book entitled Authentic Inclusion Drives Disruptive Innovation. She's a former Chief Accessibility Officer for IBM, and she's the founder of Frances West Co., a global advisory company helping public and private companies, nonprofits, and startups to operationalize inclusion as a core business imperative. I'm really excited to get started with Frances, but first I want to thank our global sponsors for their support throughout the year. The company you keep says a lot about an organization, and I'm proud that these companies choose to invest their time and treasure with us. So let's get started. Frances, in your book and throughout your work, you talk a lot about authentic digital inclusion, not so much as a priority for human resources, but rather as an overall business imperative. Can you talk with us a little bit about how adopting these perspectives has an impact, on the bottom line of a business?
Sure. First, thank you, Tom, for this invitation today. I think this topic of authentic inclusion is very timely. As you know, we just are coming out of this incredible pandemic period where all of us has had a chance to reflect our relationship, with each individual as a human beings, but also I think we all begin to appreciate how important technology is in crisis time like this, how it enables our lives and our work and also our socialization. So from that standpoint, I have always felt, and in this case, supported by some of the visionary work at company that I was with, or IBM, that we always felt like the technology is there to serve human, and that this is a inevitable kind of evolution or revolution of a technology. Is not to have technology for technology's sake, but technology made human. So if you believe that technology is really there to augment human, then it should be as part of the business imperatives, as part of the strategy, part of your digital transformation imperatives, versus being a standalone or one-off initiative in the HR department.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems, it'd be interesting to hear, your thoughts about how this has changed over time, I guess. Why is it particularly timely today? I'd love to just go a little bit deeper into your thoughts on, why digital inclusion and transformation are so important now more than ever.
This topic actually has been kind of bubbling up, so to speak. It started out actually, digital inclusion started out with more of a kind of on the legal side, American Disability Act. By the way, this will be the 36th year, I think. When we think about ADA, we think about, building access, putting ramps in or elevators. But if you think about technology, the same kind of potential barrier also exists, right? So think about if you don't design, for example, your website or your mobile apps in such a way that's enabling, for example, a blind person to read your website, or, for example, a deaf person be able to read the transcript as you and I are talking, that really creates barrier. But there's other factors actually coming into play. If you look at the demographics globally, the population is aging. Here we have 76 million baby boomers, and I'm one of those. And I can tell you, as I get older, glasses become a necessity because, I just cannot see the font size. Color contrast under the sun, when I'm holding up my iPhone matters. So these are all accessibility feature and functions. So from that standpoint, the demographic actually is another driver. Last but not the least, technology. I mean, here we are in Boston, we are the hub of innovation, and the technologies move from what I call the system orientation to personal orientation, right? When I started with IBM back in the 80s, it's all about the back office, about the mainframe. Now it's in the form factor of a cell phone like this. So that means that if you think about the technology being personalized, then you really have to think about human needs and human wants, and each one of the individuals is different. So accessibility in a way is extreme personalization. So I always say that don't think about digital inclusion is about them. You know, a lot of time we say, oh, it's about these old people, it's about these people with disabilities. But if think about it as really personalization of respecting the differences we have, and then using technology to augment our difference to make a better experience for all.
Yeah, I like this concept of personalization and accessibility. It's particularly important, it seems, today, given the global pandemic, where, as you mentioned, an aging population, they're even more dependent on technology to remain connected to each other. Kids, they're getting their education. We're seeing our physicians, everything. We've taken this leap forward, and as we leap forward, being sure that everyone is able to leap forward together as much as we can, is really, really important. I wonder if you can give some examples of how your thinking translates into specific outcomes. Who's really doing it right? Who are the people we should be following to kind of see how to do this stuff?
Well, there are companies that are in various sectors are really embracing this topic. Earlier, I mentioned the whole kind of I guess we can call it movement now. A digital inclusion is due to the technology and demographic. But another actually big factor is the social expectation, right? Again, during the pandemic, the Black Lives Matters, and now, frankly, the Asian hate. It's really bringing forward as a society. We have some social issues that we all have to address. So from that standpoint, it's actually very encouraging to see some of the businesses begin to really embrace the concept. As you probably know, that about 180 the largest CEOs that came out about a year ago. The original work actually was by Larry Fink at BlackRock to say that company needs to think about not just about shareholders, but a stakeholder as well, right? And Business Roundtable came out with this statement about we need to be more purpose-driven. So all these companies are beginning to understand, I think, align the social values along with kind of a profit drivers. And in this case, when you think about digital inclusion, if you start using, especially in this case, technology, right, to enable little things like, for example, have transcription as part of your video experience. Once you transcribe it, obviously you can have a broader application in all kinds of settings and to enhance the comprehension, but you also can translate that into different languages. So all of a sudden your outreach of your customer base has been a lot bigger. So that's why it's not, I think, not a accident that you have, for example, retail banking like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase are actually fully embracing this whole area of digital inclusion, and that so we're seeing that trend coming in. Some of the companies in the local area, like 3Play Media, they provide high-end captioning technology augmented by human. It's another great example. And last but not the least, the governments are also beginning to, the government is actually beginning to lead in this area. Again, here in our very own state of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Rehab Commission started an initiative that my company worked with. It's an initiative to educate people with disability in Cisco Academy curriculums, in this case, cybersecurity. And you and I know that cybersecurity is probably one of the hottest areas. There's such a shortage of talent. So in this case, we actually focus on training people with disability in the cybersecurity skill sets. And we work with the Holyoke Community College and Roxbury Community College locally. and some of the students are graduating and then beginning to get placed, in what I call the living wage jobs, not a minimum wage job, but living wage job, because we all know in IT industry, it's a very good, actually very good income, a very good salary. So I'm very excited and also very proud that our own state of Massachusetts actually is embracing, not just embracing, but taking actions.
Yeah, so it's interesting. From our perspective, we have close to 100 companies who've signed on to our Tech Compact for Social Justice, and I feel like there's more of an awareness around the value of really having an inclusive workforce, the better business performance. And you mentioned BlackRock and State Street, and their mandates with boards, and so that seems to be starting to change. Certainly, we have a long way to go still. I thought your point about the transcriptions, being able to pop them into different languages, for accessibility was a really interesting point, and it reminds me, that it also gives you a lot of technical advantages too around search engine optimization and just different people, different modes. Sometimes you can skim a written document faster than you can skim an audio or video file. On the other hand, the audio and video files you can listen to in the car or on a walk or whatnot. So different modes, not to mention different abilities to access the information are really interesting. I'm wondering though, what your perspectives are, around, how digital inclusion and transformation are, how we're doing. Is it making it into the C-suite and the boardroom, or from your point of view, it seems we have a long way to go still, but are you seeing progress, and do you think that we're getting traction, and if not, why?
Well, we certainly are making progress, but we still have a way to go. And this is actually one of the reasons I'm so excited that that you and I are talking today, because this is one of those areas I believe, but I've seen the impact of a top down. When I say top down, I mean really top, right? I mean CEOs and board members really taking a stand. And I give you an example. Microsoft, when Satya Nadella kind of took over as the CEO from Steve Ballmer, and he actually wrote a book about his own experience, because he has a child with disabilities. So he wrote the book, The Reset, and that he talked about how the experience fundamentally changed his perspective about his view of technology. And if you look at Microsoft, under his leadership, and the stock prices just have gone, up in a way, right? So this is an example of how, a CEO, not just thinking about it, but now, for example, they have gaming gears that made for children with disabilities, right? And so the innovation that came out of this is incredible, and actually is wide-ranging and impactful. And also, 2 years ago at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, which, as you know, is all the is who's who of the CEOs congregate, right? That's when they took to think about what's going to happen to the economy next 2, 3, 5 years. And the topic of hiring, for example, people with disability, and also the related topic of digital inclusion made the map, so to speak. And also the United Nations, actually timing of this particular interview is great, because next week on May 19th, United Nations International Labor Organization is going to run a webinar based on a primer that my company produced called Leave No One Offline, a primer how to engage companies on digital accessibility from a top-down perspective, and how to operationalize digital inclusion. So all these are indicators that you have organizations like Davos, these are thought-leading organizations, and UN moving and promoting this idea. So my hope is that, because Massachusetts, and especially in the Boston area, we have such a vibrant innovation ecosystems, and we have the next generation of health tech, fintech, age tech, urban tech coming out, and it is absolutely important that I actually don't like the phrase build back better, because the back was not that great. I think some of the social justice problem, social equity problem actually stem from some of the lack of a focus. So that's we build future better, that we think about, building in the digital inclusion from the onset. And it is with this intent, that's why I really hope, to collaborate with organizations like yours, that we really raise the awareness, because it's going to be, oh, by the way, this is one area is actually highly legislated, just like privacy and security. I always say it's actually PSA, right? Privacy, security, and accessibility, because these are infrastructure topics. This is not a optional topic, right? So if that's the case, if you are a startup company building, let's say a fintech solutions, and if you want Fidelity or Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase as your pilot, if this is going to be an industrial strength, scalable solution, you better make sure it's accessible, because otherwise, you just won't pass the legislative, kind of a bar. So it is a very timely topic for the C-suites and the board, and we all know that there is a lot of focus on the board of directors to really take the diversity issue into consideration. In this case, another interesting thing is, this is one area that you can not just talk about it, like diversity. You actually can do something about it, because it's actually can be implemented through technology. That's why I think you get a double win, if you do digital inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if there's ever a year to make the case for technology and inclusion being infrastructure elements, this is certainly
Absolutely.
I don't think you can make a stronger case than we have this year. It's interesting you talk about the top-down perspective, and we find that as we work with lots and lots of companies, and work with the women's groups and the ERGs and whatnot. We're in sort of an interesting position, because we get this meta view across them. Whereas if you're in a company, you have what your company has, but we're able to start to see differences, and the groups that are have executive sponsorship and are more aligned with business imperatives, obviously do better and have a greater impact. And so if we can, as we share that across to some of the other organizations, how important that is, it really, I think, is one of the fundamental success factors. You also touched on one of my other favorite topics, and one of the reasons I think Massachusetts is such a hotbed of innovation, and that's that we have so many world-class sectors and institutions in close proximity to each other. And so we like to refer to as the bump factor, that the innovation that happens at the boundaries between these different areas. And so, in addition to all of our academic institutions and our, healthcare and financial services and all these, great sectors that are bumping right up against technology innovators, you have institutions like Perkins School for the Blind and McLean Hospital. And so you have people who are using technology in really innovative ways to help, start to address some of these accessibility issues that you've mentioned throughout here. You also touched on on the UN, and so that raises a question about how much digital inclusion is a U.S. thing versus global. And for instance, what does it mean in terms of the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and what specifically do Massachusetts companies need to know, from what you've learned?
Well, this is like we talked about earlier. My connection with actually Massachusetts Software Technology Council way back, right? But for the past 10 or 15 years, a lot of my work actually has been focusing on the global basis, especially working with the United Nations and World Bank and all that. And so it's great to have a chance to come back and bring some of these a kind of development trend to share with Massachusetts company decision makers. This is absolutely a global topic. It actually started with a 2006 UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So that's 15 years ago, and that treaty is equivalent to like the Kyoto Treaty on the environmental movement. If you think about the Paris Accord on the environment, it's all kind of an outcome of some of the UN actions earlier. So, and I always say in the world, there's only two things matters: environment and people, right? So you have the environmental initiative that's actually beginning to really take shape, and then begin to have business model like carbon trading coming out of that. On the human side, the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disability was a milestone treaty, and 186 countries has all signed up. And the sad thing is there are only 5 countries has not. President Obama did ratify the sign up for the treaty, but was not able to get it ratified through the Congress. I actually testified in front of the U.S. Foreign Department to suggest to the government why this is important that the U.S. become a member of the UN treaty. And so because of that, 180 some countries are beginning to set up legislation, policies to drive, in this case, disability across the board, participation in the society, from transportation to education, and digital accessibility is one of that. And just about 3 months ago, at the end of last year, UN actually published a digital accessibility guideline. So you're going to see this playing out. So what does that mean at a country level? That means major countries, certainly in the developed country, like Canada just passed the Canadian accessibility law. EU just passed European accessibility law. China passed their law. And in some cases, China, Brazil, France actually have quota system, a penalty on companies who do not hire enough people with disabilities. So this is absolutely a global initiative.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering, are there resources or places that companies should go to make sure they're in compliance? You know, what do our local companies need to do to make sure they know what needs to be done here?
Well, actually, like I mentioned, I will be conducting a webinar with the UN International Labour Organization, and we published this primer. And in the primer, there are a lot of references, both the technology references, where to get some of the knowledge about, for example, accessibility, and also organization resources that one can go to understand more. And I'm local, I'm here, certainly, you know, so I'd be more than happy if there is a follow-up, a discussion, or, you know, knowledge transfer that's needed, that, you know, my company would certainly be very happy to get involved in this, because this is a topic that's not going to go away. As you and I know, with the social justice, we're actually at the very beginning, I guess, not even phase 1, we're at the foundation level. But what better time to make, you know, state of Massachusetts, or even our city, Boston, you know, to be the leader in this, precisely because what you just said about we have such robust ecosystem. And I'm doing some work with Harvard, and MIT is also doing beginning to dial in this area. And then you also have Spalding Hospital actually is one of the pilot for trying to, on this the cybersecurity initiative I just talked about. So it's really, really exciting time if we can, you know, coalesce all the resources and organize with a better focus.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely link out to your research, and certainly hope to have you back. Yeah, I find this is it's such a fascinating space, and we've done some work, and we're probably just at the beginning as well, around accessibility and around mental health, around other things in terms of how can we enable enough, you know, how can we enable more people to participate, because obviously that's good for everyone. It's good for business and bottom line. But what's also I find interesting is we've profiled some folks, you know, with different, you know, neurodiverse profiles who have, you know, attributed their success. You know, one was a CEO of a cybersecurity company who was dyslexic, and and attributes some of his history and how he got where he is based on this different different abilities that he brings to the table. So we're just beginning the conversation, and I certainly look forward to continuing with you. Were there any other final thoughts before we wrap up here that you wanted to say before we close that I didn't ask?
Well, I just thought that what you mentioned about these references of the people with neurodiversity, I don't know, you watched the Saturday Night Live last Saturday where Elon Musk was the host, and he's the first one that came out. He started his dialogue saying that the first Asperger person, manager. I think this is actually a great way to kind of close our discussion today, is that in my book, I talked about authentic inclusion is really about respecting each other's difference, not in spite of, but because of their difference. And that the diversity really drives disruptive innovation. So these examples, or whether Elon Musk or the example you just gave, it just shows that if we have people with different abilities in our midst, that is going to help us to drive this innovation and sustain the disruption that we are all looking for in business. So thank you very much for actually inviting me today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to end. Certainly when you have more people and more different perspectives, you look at your challenges and you look at your opportunities, from more of a 360 viewpoint. And so I've really enjoyed this time with you, and I look forward to doing it again. So thank you for coming out today. And thank you, of course, to all of our sponsors for helping support the programs. Take care.
Thank you.